folks, this is Rainiac bringing you another Doctor Who Series 7 review, this time for the Rings of Akhaten. I must apologise that this episode is going out a lot later than I anticipated. This was originally supposed to go up on either Wednesday or Thursday, but a few things came up, so I'm going to have to now put it out just before Cold War goes out, live on BBC television at 6 o'clock today. But better late than never, I suppose. And I'll just get the usual spoiler warning out of the way. This review contains spoilers for the episode The Rings of Akhaten. I'm getting confused already, that's not a good sign. So if you haven't seen it yet, and there's a good chance you have because it's been over a week since it first came out, please watch it first in full and then come back and enjoy this review. Now we've got that out of the way. The intro was a nice change of pace from the previous week. Last week, the Bells of St. John opened up with a very short introduction all about people's souls getting caught in the Wi-Fi, trapped in the Wi-Fi. This episode was more about Clara's origins. This episode in total was more about Clara's origins, but this introduction was more about the origins of Clara. We see the significance of the leaf. As soon as I heard the words, the most important leaf in human history, I just knew that was going to come into the plot somehow, towards the end. I just knew it. And also the book, the 101 Places to See book that Clara had last week, we learned that she inherited that from her mother, and that's why it means so much to her, along with the leaf. Clara's mother uses the term, "Oh my stars," 3 separate times in the course of the introduction alone. And later on, of course, Clara says it when the old god, or the planet Akhaten, more on that later, is revealed. She says, "Oh my stars." Didn't take me till the second watch to realise she was repeating a phrase that her mother said. So that was a nice link between Clara and her mother. I loved the scene where Clara was in the TARDIS choosing where she wanted to go first and she wasn't quite sure. And that line about her, someone asks you, what's your favourite book? And you instantly forget every book you've ever read. I've had that happen to me, so trust me, I knew where Clara's character was coming from there. I loved the excitement that the Doctor portrayed when he was taking Clara out of the TARDIS to look at the planet Akhaten, or the alien sun Akhaten, for the first time. The scene with all the different alien species really gave me a Mos Eisley vibe, from Star Wars: A New Hope, the cantina, all the different species going around. So that was a nice little scene as well. Although I did feel that for an episode that was supposedly about all these different species of aliens, and there was a nice little bit where the Doctor introduced 5 or 6 of them. I can't remember any of the names that were that were mentioned, but they all look pretty distinctive from each other, so that was a bonus. I did feel, and this was one of my major problems with the story, that they were kind of relegated to the background after about 10 minutes of screen time, and it became more about the Doctor, Clara, and the other character we're about to talk about, which is the Queen of Years, Mary Galel. Mary Galel, not Mary. It sounded like Mary in the trailer, but then I realised it was Mary. So, Mary Galel. The girl playing her, whose name is Amelia Jones, as far as I know, this was her first major acting job, and she actually did a pretty good job. It's hard to believe she's only 10 years old in real life, actually, because she gave a very good and measured performance, I thought. Now, we got our first look at the Vigil. Now, the Vigil, there's no denying it, they looked freaking cool. They really did. But the problem with the Vigil was not how they looked or how they sounded, because they had a really creepy voice, especially when they were sort of going, Mary. I can't do the impression because obviously it was enhanced in post-production with sound trickery and that. But they looked cool, they sounded intimidating and creepy, but they didn't do a right lot. They were really rather underused. I mean, they had a short battle with the Doctor and his sonic screwdriver, which was cool enough, but it was a bit too short. And some people I know did make jokes about it being like Harry Potter, to the point that they were telling me that they were casting Protego and Expelliarmus against the Doctor, and it was a bit like that. The little bit where Clara went up to the TARDIS doors and it didn't let her in, the whole concept of the TARDIS not liking Clara, I really liked that, and I have a funny feeling that's going to play a part in the overall mystery of who Clara really is. If the TARDIS doesn't like her for whatever reason, then maybe there's something bad about her or something threatening to the Doctor, and that's why the TARDIS refused to open its doors. Just a little thing to think about. Now, because I'm from Blackpool myself, as soon as Clara mentioned the Blackpool Beach and fish and chips when she was 6. I love that little reference just because it was so pertinent to me, myself, personally. I've been on Blackpool Beach quite a few times. It's not the greatest of places now, unfortunately, and I love fish and chips, so that was just a little thing for me that I really loved. I'm sure for other people it's just a little reference that was thrown away. Because Jenna Louise Coleman grew up in Blackpool, went to school in Blackpool, so it was just nice of them to bring that thing from her real life into Clara's character. I'm assuming it was from her real life. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent about real life and people I very vaguely know in real life. One small thing about Blackpool, Jenna Louise Coleman has a natural northern accent, which you'd expect because, like me, she grew up around here. And that did seem to break through her dialogue in a few places. I'm not sure if that was intentional, and I'm not criticising her for it. Just something I noticed. Now, Clara's relationship with Mary Gallel, I'll just call it the Queen of Years, because I'm not going to keep saying Mary... I'm doing it again. Mary Gallel, the Queen of Years, that relationship they had was handled pretty well. And it makes perfect sense, because past Clara from the Snowmen was a governess. And this current Clara, she has also looked after children in the past, as was the whole point of her backstory last week. Now, speaking of the Queen of Years, I get it was an important part of the plot, but for me personally, there was far too much singing in this episode. There's nothing wrong with singing, and it was done pretty well. I just felt there was too much of it, and it didn't really serve the plot all that much. It didn't serve that much purpose to the plot. I did, however, like the bit where the Queen of Years is singing to the old god to stop him from waking up, and all the audience are joining in with the song, and the Doctor is trying to get Clara. I nearly called her Jenna again. The Doctor is trying to get Clara to join in with the song, and I laughed at that because that totally happens in real life. If people are singing a song and you're there, you don't know it, you do try and pick up with the lyrics and get involved, because you don't want to be the one person there while everyone around you is singing and you're the only one sat there sticking out like a sore thumb because you're not saying anything. Then we had a few action scenes, and we're back to the sonic screwdriver being a magic wand again. I'm sorry to keep referencing Harry Potter, but seriously, we're back to the sonic screwdriver just being a pointless plot device to carry out things that couldn't be done normally in the plot. For example, how the hell did the Doctor hold up that stone door as long as he did? How did he open the door in the first place with the screwdriver? Okay, there was some sci-fi bullshit answer, apologise for the swear words, but there was some sci-fi crap answer about the door resonating so he could lift it up, but no, come on. It's a plot device. The Doctor and Clara had to get in that room, therefore the sonic screwdriver provided the way in. Now, when Clara was propelled onto the glass chamber with the mummy inside of it, on the first time I watched that, I thought that it was the Queen of Years who'd done that to stop Clara from helping her. But on the second glance, I caught a bit more of the dialogue, and she said, "It doesn't want you, it wants me." So it was obviously the mummy in the glass case that was the one that grabbed Clara to stop her from saving the Queen of Years, I would assume. And we got probably one of the best lines of the episode. "Did you just lock us in with the soul-eating monster?" I got a kick out of that. The little twist that the choristers had been doing this for thousands of years, and they were preparing whoever the Queen of Years was to be a sacrifice for the old god whenever he woke up, that was a nice little twist, although it did make the choristers seem like a very evil bunch of people, having done this for thousands of years and manipulating all these girls so that one of them would get fed to this monstrosity. Now, speaking of the monstrosity itself, the mummy, as it was called in the credits at the end of the episode, it looked pretty intimidating, but actually if you break it down, it didn't really have much of a purpose to the story, other than looking rather frightening. Okay, the Doctor calls it Grandfather's alarm clock, but why would the old god / grandfather need something to wake it up? So again, I think the mummy was criminally underused, even more so than the Vigil, much more so than the Vigil. It breaks a glass case, it thrashes about and roars a few minutes, and then it fires a beam at the planet and goes back to sleep. And that's it. There couldn't have been a device that did this? Alright, So I get the main purpose for the mummy being there was to act as a fake out, as a red herring, but still, I don't think it really served that much of a purpose. Now, Grandfather, or the old god, that looked quite impressive. It was a big fiery ball with a giant evil face on it, and though that was quite a simple concept, it actually worked quite well. On second watch, I actually realised that old god was actually the sun itself, which again is a really interesting concept. And then we came to the solution, and this was a really well done scene. There was some really, really good acting from everybody involved. Once again, Amelia Jones put in a good performance as Mary Gillel. I finally got her name right. Fantastic. It was a nice touch that the final song she was singing to try and keep Grandfather from waking up, although he'd already waken up. No, I've got that wrong. Hang on a minute. The final song she was singing after Grandfather had woken up was the same one the choristers had been singing to try and keep him from waking up in the first place. There we are. I got it right in the end. And when the doctor said, "Can you hear them singing to the old god?" I did get some flashbacks to Les Miserables. The music did sound a little bit like Les Miserables in my opinion. Not that that's a bad thing, because, you know, Les Miserables is a really, really well-written story. And then we got the doctor's speech to Grandfather, and this was, without a doubt, the highlight of the episode. In fact, it's probably the best speech that Matt Smith has ever given since "Hello, Stonehenge!" You know, in the Pandorica Opens, when he's talking to the assembled masses of the Alliance and getting them to leave. Matt Smith showed some really fine acting chops here. He portrays some real emotion and some sadness. And the 11th Doctor has finally referenced the damn Time War. I've been waiting for that ever since he was introduced back in the 11th hour. He talked about how he had secrets that could never be told, which, as we know, is building up to another story arc. And I like that for once they didn't have to resort to Doctor Who to get that point across, because it's only been a few episodes since that's come up. It's already starting to feel a little bit like it's gone past its welcome. Just a little bit. And of course it wasn't actually the Doctor who saved the day here, it was Clara, and I really liked that. It was she who travelled back to save the Doctor after remembering his "we don't walk away, we don't leave people behind" speech. And she saved the day by giving the leaf to the old god, which fed him so much that he actually exploded. Because as they explained in the plot, and they actually did a good job for the most part, not counting the Vigil and the Mummy, of explaining the damn story through the dialogue, which is what I would actually like in my science fiction, rather than having it all implied. They actually explained that because the Doctor had so many memories, but Grandfather has such a ferocious appetite, it was just about able to eat all of them, consume them all. But the leaf represented what should have been and what never had been, and that was an absolute eternity and infinity, as they called it, and even a god couldn't digest infinity. So that was a really clever way of finally defeating Grandfather. Jenna Louise Coleman, likewise as Matt Smith, really impressed me. She showed some really good acting ability and some real genuine emotion, and I actually felt kind of sad when the leaf was consumed by the old god at the end of the episode, and I couldn't quite work out why. I just kind of did. Maybe it's because I thought the leaf was going to play a part in the mystery of who Clara really was, her actual identity. So I was very surprised to see it explained and wrapped up and indeed destroyed this early into the series. I know it's technically episode 7 of the series, but I'm kind of treating it like 2 halves of a series, and indeed they're treating it like 2 halves of a series because there hasn't been much reference to the Ponds since they left back in The Angels Take Manhattan. Now there's just 2 plot holes that this ending, good as it was, does offer up. Firstly, they destroyed the sun of Akhaten. So, technically speaking, haven't they just destroyed, in the future, all the species that live there? How are they going to survive without the heat of the alien sun? Just one thing there. I suppose maybe the sun, if it was a parasite rather than a sun, it was actually superfluous to requirements and it was just feeding off the people. That's, I suppose, one way of explaining it. And the second thing is, if the old god took the Doctor's memories, and clearly it did because the Doctor felt very drained after it had finished with him, and Clara ran up and offered the leaf to satiate his appetite, Doesn't that mean that the Doctor has now lost those memories? But clearly he hasn't, with the way he was acting. As soon as he was off Akhaten, he was completely fine. So, a couple of plot holes, but they're not as bad as some of the plot holes we've had in this series before, so I was perfectly prepared to let those slide. I wasn't a huge fan of the very last couple of minutes of the episode. I really hope that Clara leaving the TARDIS to go back to her old life doesn't become a recurring theme every week. I know that the Doctor wrecked Amy and Rory's lives because they constantly travelled in the TARDIS with him, which meant that they were aging quicker than their friends. It was affecting their life. It even affected their love life, of course, back in Asylum of the Daleks, when they were actually prepared to get divorced from one another. But this show works better when the companion is constantly there and travels with the Doctor on a consistent basis. Otherwise, you get Martha Jones, where you weren't sure if she was staying or going, and of course, in the end, she went. Until she came back. Until she went again. You get the point I'm trying to make. I like Martha as a character, but that element of her kind of annoyed me. So overall thoughts on the episode. This was a good episode, but not a great one. The acting from everyone concerned was very good, particularly Matt and Jenna, but the plot was quite weak in places. I thought the monsters, in particular Vigil and the Mummy, which didn't even get a proper name, were really quite badly underused, and they didn't really serve much purpose to the story. Apart from the old god, of course, he served a lot of purpose, and he was quite a cool final villain. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen the Doctor up against a god. Arguably, the last time was against the devil. No, don't give me that. It was the devil. The episode was called The Satan Pit. Up against the devil in The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. So it was nice to see him up against a god. I also feel that this was an episode where there was 50 to 60 different alien species present on the screen at any one time. But after the first 10 minutes, they were all pushed to the background and relegated basically to window dressing. Seriously. You look at the credits, there were only 8 credited actors for the whole thing. The Doctor, Clara, obviously, her mum and dad, Mary Gillell, / the Queen of Years, the chorister, who didn't get his full name on the cast list, Doreen, and the Mummy. And that's it. 8 people, 8 characters, 8 actors. After all those people appeared on screen, that kind of proves my point that they were just background. They didn't really serve much of a purpose, and that was another problem of the episode. I feel this show works better when there's only either one or just a small collection of monsters or villains to worry about, because then the 45 minutes running time can devote a bit more time to fleshing each of them out. Here you had so much going on and so many of them on the screen that a lot of them didn't get a lot of time to flesh out the idea of what they were all about. This episode was, however, a nice little showcase for Clara and the direction her character arc appears to be going. The bit about the TARDIS not letting her in is particularly intriguing, and I have to admit that the Doctor's speech and Clara subsequently coming in to save the day was a fantastic resolution to that episode. Now, next week's episode, of course, now it's this week's episode because this review has been delayed, as I said earlier, Cold War. Cold War looks absolutely terrific. Judging from the trailer shown at the end of the Rings of Akhaten, it's going to be your typical base under siege episode, but it looks really atmospheric, and the setting of a Russian submarine, a nuclear submarine no less, that's somewhere we haven't been before, to the best of my knowledge. We certainly haven't been on New Who on a submarine. If we've been on a submarine in previous Classic Who, I can only apologise for leaving out that reference. I'm sure there'll be people looking at one person in particular who'll be able to put me right if I'm wrong there. Now, the trailer at the end of the episode didn't show off who the monster was going to be, but there was a TV trailer shown on BBC One, which not only showed off the monster in greater detail, but also gave you a little bit of a sample of his speech. And I'm going to just reveal who the monster is, so if you don't know who it is, and that's kind of why they did the trailer, to not show who the monster was, and you don't want to be spoiled, now's the time to stop this review. Close it down. Okay. The Ice Warriors. Classic monster, the Ice Warriors are back, and I personally cannot wait. So until next time, which will hopefully be a lot sooner than it took this review to come out, and again, I can only apologise, but hey, real life and all that. Join me next time when I review Cold War, and hopefully I will bloody love it. Until then, bye for now.